Speaker's Corner aboard the Villa Vie Odyssey, hosted by Kit Cassingham.
Good evening, folks. Speaker's Corner is going to be very potentially emotional. I think it'll be quite interesting. John Patterson has 40 years of distinguished career as a nuclear engineer and management, but tonight's talk is on an unrelated topic, as you can tell by this screen. So he's going to focus on our Care, Our Choice Act, Hawaii's codification of medical aid in dying. And for this, he is supremely qualified as a caregiver and advocate. So help me welcome John Patterson for tonight's talk.
Sounds like you can hear me. First of all, thank you for having me here tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about the subject. It's something very near and dear to me. Kimberly asked me a few moments ago, what do you know about this? Well, a substantial part of my presentation will be a 12-year period where I was caregiver, support, and advocate for my wife as she went through a very, very difficult medical condition. I was the one that prepared the drug cocktail that moments later would be the cause of her death. So yes, it's a very sensitive topic to me. As I go through tonight, I want to do a two-part aspect to it. First, really talking just about the legislation so that you understand what it is, what its ingredients are, because as I take you through the case history, you'll see where it comes up both in a way that helped the case history and also was an impediment to it. That has much to do with what the underlying disease is. But let me get started and talk to you about the formation of the legislation. Okay, medical aid in dying, I'm going to talk to it relative to the Hawaii formulation of it, codified in our Care, Our Choice Act. It's relatively new, passed April 5th, 2018. Even though it's Hawaii's version of medical aid in dying, many other states have similar legislation. It is my understanding that they are very similar to one another. And so in discussing one, I think it probably is generally applicable to many. So when one looks at Section 1 of the OCOCA, Our Care, Our Choice Act, the Section 1 provides a lot of the background applicable to why this law is in effect. And part of it is that Hawaii saw this as a trend that was present in many states, and cites the fact that at least 30 had considered such legislation, that it had approved by 5 at the time it was being debated in Hawaii legislature. 8 had passed it by the time Hawaii passed theirs. The 3 states most adjacent to Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, California, had such legislation, and Hawaii is very heavily influenced by those, particularly by California. Hawaii had debated it over 20 years. Another aspect in the preamble to it is a recognition that residents of Hawaii, without the legislation, had at their disposal legal ways of terminating their lives. Palliative care one thinks of as pain condition and stuff, but many hospice cases end with the statement, died peacefully in their sleep. And there's a reason for that. It wasn't specified in the legislation itself, but it just was a recognition that substantially high doses of barbiturates are often provided at end of life. And that's applicable to hospice care. They also acknowledged that voluntary stopping eating and drinking, whether that was removal of a breathing or a food tube, or just simply a conscious effort to end their life through termination of eating and drinking, is perfectly legal within the state. And similar to a decision often made by a family to stop artificial ventilation or other life-sustaining therapies. So it was an acknowledgement that this is moving the bar, but not starting from scratch. So when it gets to the law itself, you first discuss the question of applicability. Terminally ill, 6 months or less to live, adult, 18 or older, Hawaii State registered resident, competency, and capable of self-administration. Great deal of attention is given in the Hawaii preamble and in Hawaii law to assuring that this is a voluntary action. I think that's two-part. First, because it's the right thing to do, and secondly, because it was absolutely necessary to collect the support for the passage of the bill. But you notice that 3 are in red. There's a reason for that, because those things they're not absolute. When one talks about age or residency, you either are or you aren't. But the question of prognosis, particularly when you get into more rare forms of disease, becomes a much more subjective call. The same to be competent, very much in the judgment of the people who do the evaluation. And capable of self-administration is a call that can be made on the spot. I think that you'll see when I get to the case history that, at least in far as Hawaii's go, nobody is there to police you. So it is there as part of the law, but it's again, I think, more a part to get its approval than anything else. So the details are laid out here. Again, you'll see a great deal of emphasis on making sure that this is in fact voluntary, that the person that is involved makes this of their own due choice. 2 oral requests, 1 written request, 2 evaluations by providers. In this case, that's more the question of getting a validation by the physicians that this is a terminal medical issue that is being dealt with. Medical health provider, again, is the question of being competent and voluntary, and the waiting periods are just an accentuation of that. So summary, you go through, you're adult, you're a citizen, you have a terminal disease, you're demonstrated to be mentally competent, and you have a voluntary choice. For that, the state of Hawaii gives you legal access to a medical prescription capable of ending life. That's the outcome of the legislation. A secondary thing which is provided as part of the legislation, which isn't talked about much, but I think is a substantial benefit, is in Hawaii, it is the underlying disease which is listed as the form of death, not a medical overdose or something else. So that's my wife, Mary Patterson. That was her 76th birthday. Wasn't coincident. She chose that to say goodbye to us all. So let me talk to you about her case, because I think it says a lot about why the legislation, why that option was so important to her, and how it really was life-changing for her. And I don't say that as a pun. I say that because she had gone through a 12-year period of living with a disease that was constantly robbing her of her abilities. And at the time of passage of the legislation, she had to fight to legitimatize herself as a candidate for it. And when she finally reached the point where she was approved, it was a remarkable change. It took her from the depths of terror to feeling elated in what I characterize as a celebratory fashion. Now let me try to give you some details. We moved to Hawaii in 2005. Mary had had carpal tunnel surgery before we left Augusta, Georgia, and she had rotator cuff surgery shortly after her arrival. So in 2008, when she found she was having tingling in the fingers of her right hand, she really didn't think much of it. She characterized it as probably an aftermath of one of the other those surgeries. But by a year later, she was finding she had difficulty using chopsticks. She was beginning to have difficulty writing her name. 2010, she found that she had trouble with buttons, zippers, and there was this gradual degradation in her right hand ability. It came to a head in 2011 when we were at Kamehameha Schools at the museum, and they had Queen Liliuokalani's piano there and encouraged people to play it to keep it workable and in tune. Mary was the only piano player in the group and sat down to play Scott Joplin's The Entertainer, one of her favorite, and she found her hands did not respond. Now the piano was Mary's respite. You know, when she needed to get off by herself and find peace, she would sit down at the piano and play. And to lose that ability was real terror to her. She went to her doctor, and there was a series of medical examinations that took place, basically looking to see where the carpal tunnel was revisiting, and she had an electromyography in 2012, March of 2012. In May, they used a cortisone shot to the carpal tunnel region, and finally in June did carpal tunnel surgery. Even though none of these previous tests had significantly indicated that was the cause, but they felt that it was a relatively modest investment with the potential to change the direction of the loss of her right hand usage. The carpal tunnel surgery did not result in any change, and by 2013 she was logging that her right hand splayed. She could no longer do her hula moves, things like tying bows, using tweezers, placing her hand in her right pocket, tremor in both hands, camera difficulty, were all increasing symptoms that caused her to go be referred to a doctor who specialized in wrist and hand. And he committed with her to get to the bottom of it. First step was to do a complete radiography of the right hand, then nerve conduction and electromyography, and finally, when none of those proved any conclusive direction as to what these symptoms meant, she was referred to a neurologist who was a brain specialist, and particularly in various forms of dementia. I should mention before that when she went to the neurologist specialist for nerve conduction, she left his office elated because he said he couldn't tell her what it was, but he could tell her what it wasn't. And he went on to name Parkinson's disease, brain tumor, about everything she could think of. And she felt that, that it was a ticket to freedom, that all the bad issues were off the table, and that there must be a more modest solution. When she went to the brain neurologist, he spent 2 hours in the evaluation. And at the end of that, he said he suspected that the cause was corticobasal degeneration. Not something that is widely known. It's an extraordinarily rare form of dementia that attacks the motor neurons rather than the cognitive neurons. It has no treatment, it has no cure. Now, the neurologist did not spell all of that out at the time of the first appointment. He suggested she go back and research it online, and that he would examine the results of some additional testing that he had ordered, and have her come back in another month. So he ordered blood work, brain MRI, with and without dye, and on 12/4, he had her back in and confirmed his earlier diagnosis. And Mary writes in her notes, death sentence. By that time, she had done her studies. By coincidence, she and I remembered that we had had a guest in the house 2 years earlier. And a gentleman that I worked with, his wife was behaving peculiarly, and it was shortly thereafter that we got an email from him saying she had been diagnosed with corticobasal degeneration. And by that time, she was in very serious both physical and mental decay, and died shortly thereafter. So Mary took the 12/4 diagnosis as just that, and said she wanted to see the world. And so we took off to do that, and we're quite successful, taking several trips to Africa, one from Dubai, one from Miami, went to Russia, the cruise around the Mediterranean that took us down to Egypt and to Israel. She wanted to live life. Mary loved life. In 2015, though, she decided to take time out, and she went to UCSF, University of California in San Francisco, to be part of a medical trial, clinical trial, on the only drug that was being examined then, and to the best of my knowledge ever since, specific to corticobasal degeneration. Corticobasal degeneration at that point could only be conclusively diagnosed by autopsy. Otherwise, it was just simply evaluating symptoms and kind of doing it by order of probability. But one of the things that was a part of the clinical trial was a trip to Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, where they had developed a test using a PET scan, a positron emission tomography test, which was really part of the trial to demonstrate through the results of that test and subsequent autopsy that in fact there was now a means of conclusively doing diagnosis prior to death. The outcome of the UCSF clinical trial, she felt that it improved her walk, it improved her sensitivities in her right hand, but ultimately the drug was concluded by the developer to have too many adverse effects and was removed from further evaluation. That was really the last opportunity that she had to feel like there might be a way out. And from that point on, directed her attention on making the best of her life that she could. And the thing she loved to do was get on board a ship and travel. She would have fit right in. 2016 was our 50th wedding anniversary. We got on a cruise and went to Alaska. We were accompanied by friends and family, and proved to be about 28 people that took over the owner's suite of the Oceana cruise ship and went to Alaska, and it was the first celebration, because when Mary was diagnosed, we didn't know if we'd have a 50th anniversary. So to be there together with friends and family and be able to celebrate an event of such significance was just a breath of wonderful air to everybody on board, and particularly to Mary. By 2018, we'd done more cruises. We'd done a trip to Morocco. But travel was getting increasingly difficult. She found she would fall a lot and was concerned for her safety. She was experiencing panic attacks, quick to anger, and really whole body involvement at this point. So it was just a continuing gradual decay in her abilities as the disease affected more and more of her motor neurons. It's very common with corticobasal degeneration that it starts in the periphery, generally on one side, and then gradually spreads throughout the body. At this point, she was actively considering what end of life was about, and from the very point of her diagnosis, she had said that the disease will not claim her. She did not want it to be in control of her demise. So the timeliness of Hawaii entering its debate on the medical aid in dying legislation brought her hope. She, because of the issues relative to diagnosis, the fact that hers was a neurological disease, she wasn't sure that she would ever be a candidate. But the middle of 2019 brought her hope. The medical aid in dying statute became law at the beginning of 2019. Part of the legislation requires that there be an annual report, and that came out in mid-year of 2019. And one of the people that availed themselves of the law in that first 6 months suffered from ALS. ALS and Mary's symptoms comparatively were quite similar. And even though it's not a form of brain disease, or dementia anyway, the comparatives were close enough that she felt there was an opportunity for her. So really, from the moment of passage and implementation of the law, she felt that this was a way of being in control of her own demise. So she immediately contacted her neurologist and said, I want this to be my first verbal request. And her neurologist, who had earlier said he would be there for her, said, I can't. I am morally opposed. And he is fully entitled to do so under the law. It protects not only the patient, but it is also there to protect caregivers, suppliers of drugs, anyone who wishes not to be a part of the implementation of the law. Nevertheless, it was a crushing blow. She felt this one avenue to potentially give her control was stolen from her. So she called her PCP, literally that afternoon. And he had had a cancellation and was available. And she went into her PCP and said the same thing. I want this to be my first notification. And his reaction was decidedly different. He said, you know, he fully understood, he fully supported her request, but she had to understand the barrier that she was taking on. First of all, the organization he worked with was with the Queen's medical system. He said had no organization in place to deal with the law, to accommodate people who would request it. There was no listing of caregivers who were supportive of the option. So to try for him to pursue it would mean several things. He first would have to find an agreeable neurologist. This CBD is extraordinarily rare, and he knew nothing about it. And he felt that for him to certify to the state anything regarding her case would require at least a neurologist as a secondary consultant, if not the primary. There were, what he did suggest though, was that she look at hospice. And the reason to look at hospice, he said, was that the federal requirements for hospice is that you have 6 months or less to live. So that if she could get hospice to accept her as a patient, it would be a priori evidence that she met the criteria. She did so. She went to hospice. Hospice looked at her medical records from her neurologist. Her neurologist had said he did not see that she was in dire condition, and so she was turned down by hospice. Another crushing blow. So this was a very dark time in Mary's life, brought about both by the continuing degradation to the disease. At this point, she was beginning to see cognitive impacts, which are an end-state evidence of the disease. She had dysphagia, She would get up in the morning and go through sometimes up to an hour of coughing, trying to clear herself. To speak again about the Queen system, she went to have a dysphagia evaluation. They only did dysphagia evaluations during noontime, 12 to 1, a time period when she didn't experience it. And so they gave her a clean bill of health from dysphagia. So now she's fearing that she could die of choking to death. Nothing was going her way. It appeared that the mountain in front of her was swallowing her up, and it was a very, very painful time for her and a painful time for me, as her spouse, her support giver, and her advocate. She went back to the thought that there was this singular ALS person who had successfully made use of the legislation. We had been part of the ALS network, not because she had ALS, but because it was the closest support group to her symptoms. And so we called their professional who told us that she was a part of the Kaiser system, and the ALS walk was the next weekend. I went and I met with the spouse of the person who introduced me to the doctor who was the neurologist for him, and with that, Mary and I had a long talk. The federal insurance program was having its optional series, its open season, in November, and she pleaded with me to change. If we didn't know that it was a path out, but it was the only one she could see. And I admit that I was skeptical, but ultimately that was what she wanted, and that prevailed. And so we submitted the paperwork to change to Kaiser. I then called Kaiser to see if we could get an appointment for the first day of the upcoming year, 2020. Well, I don't know if you've ever tried to get a call through to Kaiser if you're not a patient, but they don't answer. Fortunately, Mary's neurologist, who had been the cause of so much pain, agreed to forward a referral because he said that's the one thing they can't ignore is a referral from a consulting doctor. And so several days later, I got a call from the neurology department at Kaiser Medical and agreed to have an appointment on January 7th of 2020. So we go to the neurologist in 2020, and he spends about 45 minutes with her. And at the end of that 45 minutes, he says, why don't you come back in 3 or 4 months? I understand your request, but at the moment, I don't see the need. And she broke down. She was terrified that in the upcoming 4 months, she would either lose sufficient cognitive powers that she would be unable to pass the cognitive tests, or she would be physically unable to self-administer and flunk that test. He said he understood and he would be right back, but he needed to go see another patient, but he would come back immediately thereafter. About 15 minutes later, he returned and he said, "You've been accepted." The universe of pain left her shoulders. You could just see such a miraculous change in this individual to finally have that mountain out of her path. He said, "Tomorrow, one of our social workers will call you. He will lay out a schedule. We have psychiatrists on staff. We have consulting neurologists on staff. We have built a program to support you. You know, in 20 days, I will be here to accept your verbal request, which was another aspect of the law, and it is now in your hands. The next day, the neurologist called, asked Mary when did she have a date in mind, and she said yes, February 15th, my upcoming birthday. She says, well, that's quick. But she called back an hour later and said, here's your schedule. She laid out the appointments with all of the required pharmacists, set the dates for when Mary would provide the written input, and Mary left with a plan. She went home, talked to the kids, talked to her friends, and the next month the house was just absolutely full of friends, loved ones. It was an absolutely beautiful environment. And with that, her date of February came due about 2 hours before her death. That was her picture taken. And I think it expresses the joy that she felt being in this environment of total love. 2 hours later, she led us into the bedroom, cracked a couple jokes in my behalf, drank her fruit juice, and in about 5 minutes fell asleep. And 40 minutes were declared dead by the attending physician. What I have told to others, and it may sound strange, but I really felt that the medical aid in dying, OCA, saved her life. It changed it from an environment of dread, of misery, to one of celebration and joy. And I think her picture expresses that, and I think she expressed that to everyone who came in contact with her, and it certainly makes her death abundantly easier to live with from this point forward. She will always be with me. With that, I'd like to turn over questions. I'd be glad to answer anything that you might have. One back in the back.
Yes, in her journey, did she look at...
Hey Steve, wait a minute till the mic gets to you.
Coming.
In her journey, did she look at Switzerland, or do you know anything how Hawaii's program compares to Switzerland?
I don't really, other than very subjectively. We did look at a number of other states. Oregon really led the U.S. effort in that regard, and it has become very much kind of the pattern for all the legislation that has followed. She did look at Hemlock Society when she was facing this mammoth mountain of obstacles. She was talking about walking off the end of our dock and drowning herself. I don't know honestly whether she was serious or not, but knowing the determination of that woman, it wouldn't have surprised me. If you're interested and want to talk to me privately, I am always happy to do so. It's a part of me. I'm not a promoter, but neither am I a critique. I believe in its availability as a choice, because I see what it did to change my wife's life in a way that nothing else could. And I know it changed her, and I know it changed me.
Wait for the mic.
Why should we get legal consent to end our lives?
That's a great question for a politician, but nevertheless, the things which she could reach once it became legal were things that she could not readily reach otherwise. I mean, she would be forced to. In the middle of all this, she had stopped eating because it was one of the things that's in the federal list of means of demonstrating 6 months or left to live for hospice consideration. So her conclusion was, well, I can do that. So she simply stopped eating, and her weight plummeted. But even when she went to hospice with that evidence, because they had read the note from her urologist, they would not accept her. So, sometimes you do what you have to do.
Do you think other states are going to be doing this?
Yes, I think they are. As I noted to begin with, there were 20 states that had considered such legislation.
Repeat the question.
Oh, the question was, do I think that there are other states that will consider this? And there have been. It was 20 years for Hawaii to take it from, the first elements of debate to the point where there was enough support for it to get it as legislation. For Hawaii, that's a tough hill to climb. It's got a number of strong religious groups that are often questioning the need for that. But I give them a tremendous credit. It's not a perfect piece of legislation. It's designed for people with predictable disease like cancer, and for those that have, more remote, more rare disease where the path forward is less clear. It's a much tougher battle for them, particularly if they don't have a supporting organization. Without the help of Kaiser, with their well-organized process to use it as really patient therapy. It's treated as a form of care for them, and it's really laudable, I think, how they have organized to be supportive of something for people in end of life. Smitty?
Okay, I've just been through this, and I'm from Hawaii, and we were already certified, both myself and my wife were certified in the program that we've been talking about tonight. And on my wife and my way to board this ship, she got sick, and septicemia killed her in 3 days. And the trauma that you go through that would be terrible, but we had already adjusted ourselves. We understood what was going to be happening at some point in our lives, that we would have to confront this issue one way or another. And it really does help you confront and respond to even an unplanned death, that if you've worked through this process before it happens, it's greatly helps the person that's surviving, as well as helping the spouse or whatever family member is helping the person that's dying through that process.
Thank you, Smitty. I appreciate that, and I fully understand everything you say, because I experienced both of them.
Since Kaiser doesn't operate in every state, are they following the principles of Dr. Volkian in doing what they're doing, or are they co-joined in any way?
Are you talking about people in other states? There are organizations like the Hemlock Society, which sort of operate undercover, and my sense is they're given reasonable leeway by law enforcement organizations where there isn't, a formal approval by law. But I'm really probably not the one to talk about that. My experience is taking my wife through her journey, and through that I became very familiar with the pros and cons of Hawaii law. And I do want to say I think of it much more positively. I think the shortcomings are modest, except when you confront them, they become not modest. There I'm sure are people that are far more knowledgeable in what the entire statewide environment is with that regard.
Thank you for sharing your story, John. Is part of the legalization recognized then, or kind of set forward so that it is recognized by, say, life insurance as a recognition, as a dying from a disease as opposed to suicide?
I have always assumed that that's part of the reason that the state includes that provision, that the formal cause of death is documented as death by corticobasal degeneration, even though the physical cause of death was narcotics. I have not heard any evidence that the insurance contests with that, because part of it is that this person is terminal. One could argue whether it's 6 months or 9 months or 3 months, but there's no question that death is imminent, and so I think there probably would be a far greater negative sides for them to take that tack than to just simply accept the state's assertion that this is the correct cause of death.
As a follow-up then, is there then no documentation through the medical provider or person who prescribed the medication? The
Administering doctor signs off on the cause of death being corticobasal degeneration.
Okay.
So
I just didn't know if, since it was a law that was passed legislatively,
I
that
think the law really just simply facilitates what is the right thing to do anyway. So remember, this was a 20-year evolution, and so I'm sure the medical community was brought into that debate. I think the other portion of that is, for many, the term suicide has a very negative aspect to it, whereas it really doesn't apply in this case. I mean, this is an instance where the disease has taken its toll, and what we're talking about is a minor difference in timing. So I really applaud them for doing that. I assume, though, it is present in
Yes. John, what are the timelines from making the decision to go through it and actually doing it? And what would happen if the person became ill enough that they could not complete the self-administration?
It's one of the things that's actually changed in legislation. If you look through that, it's a fairly prescribed process in terms of time delays, 20 days between this and that, and so taking it from beginning to end, the shortest time you could do it would be in about 30 days. And Hawaii found that about a third of the patients were unable to make it through the 30 days and to alleviate themselves of whatever pain it was. So they have shortened some of their time conditions, my understanding is considerably. Where it was 20 days, it was down to 2, but I haven't revisited it, since Mary's death, so I'm not really sure that I have that correct. But I do know that there were then, and I looked at the most recent report, continue to be people that start the process and are unable to finish it, possibly because they wait too long to initiate it.
Because nature took its course.
Yeah, but it's still not something which is like advertised. I mean, you have to know about it, and you really have to go to the right caregiver, because I believe that if we were still in the Queen's medical system, we'd still be waiting for them to give their support to take us through the process. They just simply are not a supporter of medical aid in dying. It's not part of their ethic. And Kaiser has taken a different tact, and do you have Kaiser in Big Island?
Yes, we do. I'm not a member, we do have Kaiser.
I have had other people come to me that were in the process of trying to utilize the system and facing the same stone wall that we did. And my advice was, go take out a policy with Kaiser. You can cancel it, 30 days later, but go with an organization which has put forth a disciplined organization to deal with this as a patient option.
John, back here on the left.
Okay, one more.
Yeah. Over here.
Yeah.
I can't imagine going through what you went through as having been married for 50 years and then the prospect of losing your life partner. Were there any resources made available to you, such as counseling or anything that to help your wife go through this process, or after the fact? And if so, did you take advantage of any of those?
Interesting question. Remember that Mary died on February 15th, 2020. Shortly thereafter, the state closed its doors. Yeah, it was very difficult. I am locked in my house. The people that I expected to be there as my support weren't available. It was a very, very difficult time. I would say before that, I was so totally consumed trying to be the support for Mary that I never really worried about myself. And I really have never thought about that, but certainly after her death, when I felt really empty, I missed that, and I thought how wicked it would have been if she had chosen a date a month later, because none of that environment would have been available, and remain thankful to this day that she chose her birthday. Well, thank you all. I do appreciate you coming and listening to my journey. And as I say, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to pull me aside and ask me. It's a subject that I'm comfortable talking about. In fact, I really enjoy sharing the story because of its outcome. It brought peace to my wife, and as a result, brought peace to me. Thank you.
Thank you, John.